language is difficult. If I said to you, "You have tomatoes in your eyes," would you know what I was talking about? That's a German idiom. It means you're not seeing things clearly. You have tomatoes in your eyes. Or let's say you were not a native English speaker and I said to you, "It's a piece of cake." You'd probably look for the piece of cake, right? Or if I said, "You can't put lipstick on a pig," you would say, "Why would you want to put lipstick on a pig?" It's very hard to translate from one language to another. I remember when I was in college, I was studying Russian, and my professor gave me a Russian book that was too advanced for me. And I tried to translate just the first page of this novel, and I came back the next day and I said to the professor, "I think it's something about a naked German lying on a hill with dead crayfish all around." And he said, "I think we better go back to something easier." It was a naked hill with dry bushes on it. Or I had a friend who, she wanted to study Swedish, God bless her. Those Scandinavian languages are really hard. She was in Sweden at a dinner table with a family, and she thought she was trying to say to them, "I don't have an idea," or "I don't know how to speak, I don't have an idea." And she kept saying this when she didn't understand something over and over, and they looked more and more confused. So that night she went home and tried to look up what she was saying, and turns out she kept saying over and over, "I have a man." It's really important for us to understand that the Bible was not written in English. Now, this is the Episcopal Church, so I'm not going to ask you to check your brain at the door. We're going to admit that the Bible was not written in English. It's a translation. Not only that, but the Bible was written in an ancient language, two different languages, Hebrew for the Old Testament, Koine Greek for the New Testament. Ancient languages had much fewer words, which means that every time you translate the Bible, you're taking this ancient word which meant so much, and you're trying to choose between, on average, 17 different English words that are very precise and limited in their meaning. So every time we translate the Bible, we are drastically limiting its meaning. Which is so important when you come to texts that trouble you. Don't stop. Dig deeper. Go back to the original language and find out more about the meaning. If we only read the English version of the gospel for today, it would not make sense. Jesus is telling us to hate our mother, our father, our husbands, our wives, our children, our friends. It doesn't make sense because Jesus says the first commandment is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So does that mean our families aren't our neighbors or something? Or I thought one of the 10 commandments was honor your father and mother. How are you supposed to honor your father and mother and hate them at the same time? It doesn't make sense. So I went back to the bigger word. The word for that we translate as hate in the English language, in the ancient Greek is miseo. One of the meanings of miseo is hate, but another is love less or love after. In the psalm that we sang this morning, one of my favorite psalms, it says that the Lord knit us together in our mother's wombs. The Lord searched me out and knows me. God is the source of all love. God created you out of love and knows you like no one knows you. All love that we have for other people has to come after our love of God. And actually, it comes from our love of God, because all love comes from God. If we love someone in our family or a friend or a child or a parent more than we love God, then that love becomes distorted. It becomes obsessive. It becomes an idol. And we end up trying to control that person or mold them into the one we want them to be, and it breaks. No love works unless it comes from the love of God. Believe me, as one who's made that mistake. So what if Jesus wasn't saying to hate the people we love, but to love them second to God, or from the love of God, like how a river parts into branches? May the love of God be the primary love, and all others from that grow. On Friday, I did a funeral for a woman who was a faithful member of this cathedral. She had battled ovarian cancer for about 6 years. And boy, did she grab hold of life. Between diagnosis and death, she went to 18 countries with her husband. She, like so many of you, was a private person and a humble person. And so I didn't really know a lot about her life until after she died, when her husband came into my office to tell me about her. They had been married for a lifetime. They had a lifelong love, which is a great gift from God. But one of the successes, one of the reasons that their love was so beautiful, was because Diane put God's love first. Right after they were married, they moved to Venezuela and joined the Peace Corps. And they were placed in a little village in the mountains of Venezuela that was very remote. Diane was trying to teach the women how to sew and how to garden. Bob was trying to teach the men about carpentry and mechanics. They were very poor and very happy. The Peace Corps doesn't give you much to live on. One day, some of the villagers came to Diane and they said, "We need some money to buy a coffin for a baby girl." And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. How did the baby girl die?" The villagers said, "Well, she hasn't died yet, but she's going to. She's very sick, and it's God's will." And Diane said, "Well, what if I took her to the city, to the hospital?" And they said, "Well, thank you so much, but we couldn't afford, if she dies in the hospital, to have her body shipped back to the village. So it must be God's will that she die here." Can you imagine that kind of poverty? Quiet Diane said, softly but firmly, I think it's God's will that I'm here. And I'm going to take that baby girl to the city, to the hospital. And if she dies, my husband and I will pay for her body to be transported back to the village. And Bob thought, we will? It was more money than they could afford, by far. And she didn't even ask him. He was just standing there. She took the baby girl to the city, to the hospital, and the little girl survived. She brought her back to the village where everyone loved her from then on. But she forbid Bob to ever tell anyone this story. He hadn't even told their children. But he told me. And I asked him if I could tell you, because I don't think Diane is embarrassed anymore. Diane knew that to put God's love first was to love her husband better. And I think Jesus is trying to tell us that if we put the love of God first, we'll love everyone else better and more and in a greater way. Because God's love is so much better than our love. And we want that love to flow through us to the world. Not our limited, human, faulty love, but God's great, beautiful, expansive love. Amen.